And I'd like to start off by making everyone aware that today's session is being recorded and that all the event recordings will be made available on the post-summit event webpage, which will be shared with all registered attendees once live. Today's event will be available in English and Spanish thanks to Cornell University's Translator-Interpreter program. Our interpreter today is Christian Mancheno. To hear our talk in Spanish, you can click the interpretation or language button in the control panel as depicted on this slide and select Spanish. I'll give folks a moment to do so now if they choose. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the start of our 5th annual New York Seafood Summit and first ever virtual summit. While we're disappointed that we did not get to interact with you in person, we're excited to be able to expand our summit activities and all right. Welcome to the 2021 New York Seafood Summit. I would like to start off by making everyone aware that today's session is being recorded and that event recordings will be made available on the post-summit event webpage, which will be shared with all registered attendees once live. Today's event will be available in both English and Spanish thanks to Cornell University's Translator-Interpreter program. Our interpreter today is Christian Mancheno. Thank you, Christian. To hear today's talk in Spanish, you can click the interpretation or language button in the control panel as depicted on this slide and select Spanish. I'll give folks a moment to do so now. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the start of our 5th annual New York Seafood Summit and first ever virtual summit. While we're disappointed that we do not get to interact with you in person, we are excited to be able to expand our summit activities and enhance accessibility by offering them through this virtual platform. My name is Mike Saramella. I am the Seafood Safety and Technology Specialist with New York Sea Grant. For those of you who are not familiar with New York Sea Grant is one of 34 university-based programs under NOAA's National Sea Grant College Program. New York Sea Grant is a cooperative program between NOAA, Cornell University, and the SUNY system. For nearly 50 years, New York Sea Grant has worked to support novel research of use to coastal communities and economies and has provided technical support through multidisciplinary extension and education programming. You can check the chat box now for a link to New York Sea Grant's website to learn more about who we are and what we do. For those of you who are not familiar with the New York Seafood Summit, it was initiated in 2016 as a means of engaging and facilitating discussions among seafood stakeholders in New York. This includes those involved in seafood production, processing, sales, preparation, and those simply interested in eating more New York seafood. While the summit traditionally has consisted of an in-person 2 to 3 hour session in Manhattan, this year's summit activities will expand throughout the week with 1 hour sessions Monday through Thursday and a 2 hour session on Friday to wrap up the week. Each session will begin at 3 p.m. Check the chat box now for a link to the summit website with additional details on each event and how you can register. This week's events would not be possible without the continued support of our Seafood Summit partners and planning team. I would like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves and their organizations now. We'll start with Dr. Stephen Frattini of the Center for Aquatic Animal Research and Management, who worked with New York Sea Grant in 2016 to initiate the New York Seafood Summit and has been actively involved in the planning and execution of the event ever since. Steve, the screen is yours.
All right, great. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen. I'm a veterinarian and the owner and president of the Center for Aquatic Animal Research and Management that we lovingly know as Sea Farm. We're really proud to welcome you to the New York Seafood Summit in its new virtual and week-long format. We really hope that this new format will engage and excite you to become more involved in the New York seafood scene and work with us to elevate New York seafood and all parts of the New York seafood industry. Sea Farm takes a food systems approach to ensuring animal health and welfare, as well as the viability and success of your seafood business. Please feel free to reach out to discuss any topic from the fish to the dish. We truly hope you enjoy your time with us this week, and we look forward to a bright and delicious future. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mike. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. I'll now pass the screen to Linda Lavulet with the Department of Agriculture and Markets, who has been an important member of the summit planning team since 2017 and crucial to its success in finding host partners.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks, C. Grant, and my other co-host. As Mike said, I'm a special assistant at the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. My job is to assist fishermen and farmers with economic development. I grew up fishing and clamming in the Great South Bay and can remember when you could practically walk from one clam boat to another across to Fire Island. In the summer, my family lived off clams and bluefish we caught. Historically, fish were plentiful and it was easy for fishermen to get their products to market. Today, the Long Island seafood industry faces many challenges: poor water quality, harmful algae blooms, catch limits on traditional stocks, and the loss of fish and shellfish processing. But there's hope. Scientists and fishermen are working together. We have a great new breed of fishermen and aquatics who have reinvigorated the oyster industry and are on their way to bringing back scallops and clams. Seaweed culture is coming too. And new chefs like Victoria and fishermen are working together to bring delicious new fish onto your plate. So New York has the most sustainable seafood practices in the world. So please enjoy the Seafood Summit and eat lots of local fish. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Next, I'll pass the screen to Claire Harton with Green Rabbits, who joined the planning team in 2017 and hosted our second Seafood Summit at the School of Visual Arts in New York City.
Hi, did that work?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Claire Harden. As Michael said, I've been affiliated with the School of Visual Arts. I'm a professor part-time, and I'm involved with food systems planning the rest of the time. I develop special projects, and one of the projects I've had the pleasure of working on as Green Rabbits is with the New York Seafood Summit, and I'm really excited to help more people across the whole seafood industry connect with more people who are going to buy the seafood. So thank you.
Thanks, Claire. The next member of our planning team, Liz Carollo with Grow New York City, joined the summit team in 2018 and has been hosting the summit at Project Farmhouse and assisting with planning ever since.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about Grow NYC. Grow NYC is a 50-year-old nonprofit. We make it easy and enjoyable for residents of all 5 boroughs to have a positive impact and contribute to a vibrant, livable New York City. Residents can participate in a variety of ways, whether it's shopping for fresh produce at our green markets, farm stands, or fresh food box sites, dropping off food scraps for compost at our collections throughout the city, visiting a community garden or our farm on Governor's Island, or learning about the environment, nutrition, and agriculture on our distance learning page on our website. We're thrilled to be part of the annual Seafood Summit. Green markets are of the few places in the city where New Yorkers can reliably purchase fresh seafood and shellfish that was caught and raised in our nearby mid-Atlantic waters. It doesn't get fresher than that. We know that local porgy, flounder, and oysters are just as important to a healthy and robust regional food system as tomatoes, corn, and apples. Year-round, green markets across New York City, shoppers can visit one of our wild-caught fisheries, American Seafoods, SeaTuck, PE&DD, Pura Vida, and Fish House, as well as Hudson Valley and Max Creek, 2 land-based fisheries raising salmon and trout. You'll hear from John Ing of Hudson Valley Fisheries in tomorrow's session and learn all about their operation. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Liz. Lastly, I'd like to pass the screen to Emma Forbes. Emma is the newest member of the planning team and the new aquaculture specialist for New York Sea Grant.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emma Forbes with New York Sea Grant. I joined the Sea Grant team in September of 2020. I am a born and raised New Yorker, so I've been away for the past 8 years. I'm really excited to be back in my home state and working with this group and with New York Seafood. My role with the New York Sea Grant is to support the development of sustainable aquaculture throughout the state. So I'll be working with existing and emerging aquaculture ventures from the Great Lakes region down to Eastern Long Island. Since I'm new to the position, I've taken the last few months to acquaint myself with the industry and learn the ins and outs of aquaculture happening in New York. I am just beginning to develop my extension programming with New York Sea Grant, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with all of you. Thanks.
Thanks again, Steve, Claire, Liz, Linda, and Emma for all your support and time you've dedicated to planning this year's New York Seafood Summit. Before we're getting started, I'd like to review some ground rules for today's event. We have set it up as a meeting which allows participants to share video and audio so that we can hopefully facilitate a more engaging and interactive Q&A session. However, we ask that you do keep yourself muted when not speaking. If you have questions, please feel free to share them in the chat box at any time. The chat box can be found in the Zoom control panel as depicted on this slide, or you can raise your hand using the reactions button shown here. During a Q&A session, we will ask those who raise their hands to unmute and share their questions as we see them raised. Finally, we ask that all participants and presenters show respect to one another as we engage and learn throughout this week. Now, to start this week's activities, I would like to ask Linda to introduce our special guest who will share some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mike. On behalf of New York Sea Grant and the Summit Planning Team, I would like to welcome the Commissioner of New York State Agriculture and Markets, Richard Ball. We appreciate your support and joining us today to kick off the 2021 New York Seafood Summit. Thank you, Commissioner Ball, for this. The screen is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me join you today. I'm happy to be with you, even if virtually. It is so important that we continue to have these important conversations about how we can assist the agricultural industry navigate these challenging times and build back better. We have been proud to support the seafood and aquaculture industry at the department, particularly through the New York State Grown and Certified program. Seafood, such as shellfish and wild-caught finfish, are eligible for the program, demonstrating our fishermen are verified for their attention to food safety and environmentally responsible practices. We have 33 oyster farms and fisheries in the program so far, and we're growing. We have also made grants available to New York State Grown and Certified producers, with a number of our oyster farms and fisheries receiving funding to improve food safety practices and to assist with marketing efforts. Empire State Development has provided assistance to the aquaculture industry, especially oyster farmers, to help increase production and operational efficiency. We've held a series of roundtable meetings to discuss issues related to New York seafood industry, such as ways to increase resources and information to promote marketing and sustainability of New York seafood, and provide educational opportunities for consumers. I'm pleased that we have built these strong relationships with the industry over the years, as there has been no time like last year to show us how imperative they are. Thanks to the connections that have been made, we have also been able to directly support our seafood industry through the Nourish New York program, which provides funds to our food banks to purchase surplus agricultural products from New York producers, such as our fisheries, and deliver it to households in need across the state. In the early days of the pandemic, we worked hard to provide guidance to all our producers so they could continue to operate safely and keep the food supply chain open. As part of that, we put temporary regulations in place that allowed retail restaurants to process and sell fish directly to consumers. We are committed to supporting the New York seafood industry now and for the future. We have more to do, but I look forward to working with you to continue to grow your businesses, and I wish you a good summit. Thank you.
We thank Commissioner Ball for taking the time to prepare those opening remarks for us today and highlighting some of the statewide seafood efforts going on. To optimize your view of today's culinary demonstration, it would be best if everyone turns off their video and selects Hide Non-Video Participants by clicking on the 3 dots in the top right of any participant's window whose video is currently off. You can also use the pin feature function that's here to pin Chef Victoria Blamey's 2 live video streams to the top. Note that some versions of Zoom do not allow 2 video streams to be pinned. I will now hand the screen over to Liz to introduce today's speaker. Thank you, Liz.
All right, thanks, Mike. We want to get right into the demo, but first, a quick introduction of Chef Victoria Blamey. A native of Santiago, Chile, Chef Blamey has had an already illustrious career in fine dining at Michelin-lauded restaurants around the world, where she's worked with a number of visionary and accomplished chefs. And while Chef Blamey holds a reputation for preparing bold, creative, incredibly delicious dishes, to us at Green Market, she holds very special recognition as a real deal, bona fide green market chef. And by that, I mean she cares about the ingredients, she knows and has formed relationships with the farmers and producers, and she donates her time to educating the eating community, us here today, on how to prepare an often overlooked species, monkfish, in simple and delicious ways. If you're looking to actually taste Chef Blamey's dishes in the real world, she will be joining she'll be joining the Stone Barns Chef in Residence program from April 14th to May 8th. And you can find out more about that on the Stone Barns website, and I'll drop a link in the chat in a minute. Without further delay, I want to thank American Pride Seafood for donating the monkfish for today's demonstration, and I'm sending it over to the kitchen. And now, Victoria, we're delighted for you to take the helm.
Hi guys, how are you? Super excited to be here. Excited to be working with seafood. It's my favorite thing to do. And excited to be working actually with monkfish. Coming from Long Island, I always try to support as much as I can in restaurants, working with local seafood. I think sometimes monkfish, as I think I mentioned before, is a bit obscure and people are afraid of it. I'm not quite sure the reason, but it's a very delicious fish, very versatile. I use it in many different ways. And actually today we're gonna be doing one raw preparation that I know sometimes is not really something that common. So we'll be doing a crudo or little sort of ceviche. And the second preparation is gonna be treated more as a steak. So we're gonna marinate it and then sear it. And it's gonna go with a reduction of maple, soy, and wild apple molasses, and a little bit of also puntarelle. So that's, I hope it's easy enough, and I hope it's exciting enough. So I'll get to it. First of all, well, there's the monkfish. I don't know if you guys can see it, right? We have cleaned, it's already off the bone, okay? We have cleaned the skin and some part of the membrane. I already have one of them that is going to be for the crudo preparation that I'll show you right now. So this piece has been salted for about 20 minutes. The idea of salting is that it can get more structure and also flavor into the skin. Some people brine it, but sea salt on top is actually the same concept. It's just dry. What we'll do is that I'm gonna rinse it, pat it dry, and then we're gonna roll it in some ají dulces, which are these guys. They're from the summer actually. So these are dehydrated. I've ground those, and we're gonna roll that with a little bit of sea salt, and then we're gonna torch it very lightly, just to give it a little bit of smoky flavor. And it doesn't really have a lot of heat, so it's just more floral than anything else.
Chef Blamey, do you want to tell us why you chose monkfish for your demo today?
Because I think it's unappreciated. I think the problem with monkfish is like this time of the year, it's everywhere. You know, I mean, I used to have it at the restaurant, you know, in 2019. And people sometimes have the misconception that it has a strong flavor. I know that it's not the prettiest fish to look at, but funny enough, the ugly thing about monkfish is the face. And very rarely has anyone seen the face of a monkfish because the head is so heavy that you can't really get it like that, even in the restaurant. I like it, and I think people should buy it more often, and should tend to like move away from, you know, either salmon, you know, even though I like halibut, but you know, people just tend to do salmon, halibut, striped bass, and whatever else, you know. And I think we need to make an effort to just try to encounter and appreciate other species that we have plenty around. So that would be the reason number one. Reason number two is because if we want to do different recipes, I think a crudo as a monkfish. I've seen it quite some time in England, not so much in the US. I thought it would be fun to make. This is actually the first time making it that way for me. I usually do a scallop ceviche this way, but I thought that would be fun for people to watch and then, try to be a little bit more adventurous. So after rolling this into the ají dulce and the salt, which I hope you guys can see, I put a rag underneath just so it doesn't get too hot and it doesn't stick. Now make sure these actually are very easy to find. So it's also not necessarily a chef tool because it's not for that. But you can give a different spectrum of flavor just by doing this. I'm not actually cooking the fish at all. I'm just searing very gently, sort of charring the spice. I'm gonna roll it. Unfortunately, you guys can't smell this, but if you could, I'm sure you would like it. Obviously, the skin tightens up a bit. And I just try to be gentle, move it around, and that's it. After I do that, I will leave it in the fridge just to cool down whatever heat it has. I have previously done one just so we don't run out of time. Then what we'll pair this with will be all the season right now we have on citrus. So I don't know if you can see it. I think you can. We have tangelo. We have right here cara cara. We also have an oro blanco. And we'll do a little citrus marinade, smoked oil that I have right here, a little bit of fish sauce, and some herbs. So I have some mint and we have some tarragon, just to keep it simple. Now, actually someone did ask me and said, do you think that monkfish will be too chewy when you have a crudo? Not necessarily. Now, I think salt in the fish is important, and I think the textures like cod, in England, people salt the cod to give it more structure. I think that would help. But the idea is for you guys to try something different with a fish that probably people don't usually try. Now, if, let's say summer, obviously this could have been paired with so many other things, but right now I think citrus is just, so abundant in general. Radicchios as well, that's also something that can go really well with this. So, anyway. We are gonna very gently slice. I wouldn't necessarily call this a ceviche just because it's not going to have necessarily a large amount of citrus, and I'm not having also any onion, but we will have some chives, which I think it will give you that allium flavor that pairs really well with fish in general. As you can see, it's really, obviously you do need to have a sharp knife, but it's not difficult to slice. Always do it on a bias, I think, with some sort of angle. Presentation wise is nice, and also it allows you to have longer or wider slices to present on the plate.
And if you don't have a torch at home, could you do a quick sear? Is there another way? Or
for sure, I think if you do a quick sear, I wouldn't use any oil.
Okay.
So I think sometimes it's interesting, people don't talk about this that much, but there's a lot of heat and there's a lot of flavor and that you can bring up from a pan without using actually oil. So obviously you're conducting with the oil, but if you were to do even broccoli or anything else without any oil in the pan, you are actually also cooking it. So I will do it in a pan for probably like a non-stick and just roll it gently. But that's what I will do. I like this sort of technique because I think it's fun, you know, to implement the smoke flavor into it. I also don't have a smoker. If someone had a smoker, I'm assuming, you know, that will be a very fun thing to do, but I will make sure that it's cold, you know.
So we were talking before your demo about how you just recently visited an oyster farm in New Jersey. Anything particular that you learned there about aquaculture?
Well, I mean, apart from that, it's a really hard work. I seriously bow to the people that have an oyster farm. I am a big fan of oysters. I'm a big fan of shellfish in general. From clams to oysters to mussels to cockles, everything. But I think especially being from Chile. But what I learned so much is that every single farm is different, you know. I thought it was very interesting to know that every farm technique, it depends actually on the farmer. So I visited, I believe, 3 farms. One of them was sort of drier on the lower tide, and then the tide would come up 3 hours later, which was really scary in the sense of like the amount of work that you can do is very minimum depending just exactly on the tide. Other ones that I saw that were deep in the water, deep in the water, and the flavors of the oysters were all very different. Also, I felt really terrible that I was so ignorant that I didn't know that New Jersey had incredible oyster farms. I met someone really interesting named Lisa Cavallo. She is a scientist for Rutgers University, and she was a crazy person to be answering my email when I just emailed to say how amazing this initiative about harvesting, basically replenishing the I can't remember what area they were doing, but with oversized oysters, you know. So not only with the pandemic, like restaurants suffer, but at the same time, all the oysters that they were supposed to be harvested in the summer, they overgrown because there were no restaurants. And that also makes you think about how is it possible that we just eat oysters as a, you know, roll bar and not anything else, you know. So I just thought it was incredible, the ecological work that is done and the restoration that they're doing. It was just mind-blowing. So hopefully I'll be able to join this summer again. Yeah.
Did you make the dried pepper rub yourself? And what is a good way to do that?
I did make it myself. These chilies right here. I just dry them very, very low heat in the oven. I actually also have a dehydrator, but you could do it in the oven. You could do also a different chili, but with that, you just have to be careful how spicy you would like it. For example, if you can't have ají dulces right now, what I would do, I would choose some chile de árbol, and even some jalapeno, like dry jalapeno, but a smaller amount. Or in, you know, even though you could use some Thai chili as well, but just very, very little, crush it. You can use a mortar and pestle. Try to use some coarse salt because it gives it texture, and then just mix it. And then you just roll it. That's all I did. So now to this, what I will do is I have some fish sauce over here. I do love working with fish sauce, by the way. It gives it an interesting umami flavor that is not salt, just seasoned, you know. The fish sauce, it gives you a sort of funky smell and flavor that I love so much. Okay. I also have some of the citrus already cut, but I can cut some for you so you guys see that it's super, super easy to do. And like I said, you still have a good amount of time right now to enjoy Oro Blanco, the Tangelo, the, you know, Cara Cara. You just have to be careful of the sweetness, I would say, of the citrus. Like, for example, the Cara Cara is quite sweet, which is this one. It is delicious for, obviously, juice, but I think also to eat on its own with maybe some dried fish. That would be something fun to do. For this preparation, I only cut just a little bit. So that's just literally half of a quarter of a Cara Cara. Lemon and lime, always I love so much too. And I have mint, chives, and as you guys can see, I also have some tarragon. Usually when I use tarragon, I just use the leaves whole. I don't really like chopping them. Oro Blanco has an interesting characteristic because even though being on the family of the grapefruit, is not very sour, as much on the sweeter side, has an interesting amount of juice as well. I wouldn't use grapefruit necessarily. I'm not a big fan of pink grapefruit. I think it sort of traumatized me when I was a kid. I used to eat it too much. So I love all the other varieties that we have. This is the Tangelo.
The camera, the phone camera that's to your right, do you mind picking up that plate and showing us an up close shot of the crudo?
Yeah. So that would be, can you see it?
Yeah, maybe up a little bit closer. Yeah, that's great. Beautiful. Wow.
So, and then this is the Cara Cara. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah. So again, Cara Cara, great texture, super juicy, but sweet. At least this kind.
Blamey?
So I try the sweetness to be a little bit more tame, you know?
Are the citrus you're using, are you using actual cuts of the fruit or is it zest?
Oh, no, it's cut of the fruit. Yeah. I just did it in advance, so I was just trying to be aware of the timing, but I can show you. So for example, this is the Cara Cara. All you need to do, cut the bottom and top. You can see it has also a wonderful color. The juice is incredible. And all I do is just cut around this way. And I just pick the segment. So I cut in between the membrane. Then you have a segment. I don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then what I do, you can actually leave it just like that. I'm just picky because I'm a chef, you know, it's just bad trait. But, and then I just start cutting like this. Just make sure you have a sharp knife. That's all you need. And the same thing with the Oro Blanco, same thing with the Tangelo, and well, the Cara Cara that we just used.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And this time of year, what other Long Island seafood varieties do you like?
This time of the year, good question. I mean, you caught me there. I don't know.
Or really any time of the year, just what kind of fish and shellfish do you like picking up at the market?
What I use a lot, I do love having talfish. I also think is not appreciated enough. You know, it's a beautiful fish. I think it's called the clown of the sea. As in, like, the monkfish is called monster or devil of the sea or something, just because the poor thing is ugly. But I love talfish. I love hake. I love obviously striped bass whenever available. I absolutely adore also black bass. And pollock I have not used a lot. I've used it a couple of times. Mackerel is my ultimate favorite. I really, really think is, at least in Chile, you know what's so funny? I was just recently there, and the amount of Boston mackerel that they had at one point, because I went to a fish market, I think it was like 60 tons. And then someone said to me, yeah, but I can't take it. You know, people just don't eat it. And I just still couldn't believe that.
How do you typically prepare mackerel?
It depends. I like it as a crudo too. I also like it as a tartare, but I do like it lightly seared, you know. Lightly seared to medium rare, very, very gently on a grill, not a sotepa necessarily. And I like putting some seaweed, like dry seaweed on top. Olive oil, salt, and I love caper leaves. I don't know if anyone has used caper leaves. I mean, those are great. They're usually salted or they come in olive oil. Those are actually really great too. So anyway, so this is the crudo. We're finishing right now. I am gonna add on a little bit more of that ají dulce. I did add on a touch of the Thai chili, just in case, you know, just to spice up that heat level. And that's that. I don't know which camera there.
Yeah, right up there. That's great.
Here.
It's so beautiful.
So,
And then do you have to wait any amount of time for kind of the citrus to do its magic, or do you eat it right away?
to be honest with you, I would eat it right away. I wouldn't really wait. I would just say that probably what I would do is put a touch more oil. I do love olive oil. This is smoked, but it's very gentle. I also would say, you know, even though it might seem that this is a little bit obscure of chef little ingredients, you know, many supermarkets have smoked olive oil. They're usually Spanish. They're very light, and they add on a very interesting depth of flavor to a crudo like this. But probably I would add on more olive oil, and that will be it. I will go right in. So where should we leave this here? Yeah, in the furniture. Yeah. And now, so the sear option that we have is that I marinated these 2 pieces of, I made like a steak basically. They're like 5 to 5 something ounces of monkfish. Okay. I marinated this with some black garlic, which is this, made a paste of that, and with a little bit of white miso. White miso, you can also find it in many different stores, even Whole Foods these days. And the paste, you just basically peel this garlic. I'll show you straight away. It is a misconception too that this is fermented. It's actually not. It's just cooked for like 140 or something days or 40 days at X temperature, and it becomes this way. So it's very tangy, and the texture is really interesting, very sweet. So that with white miso, little bit of water, and a touch of olive oil just to make the marinade, which would end up being something like this. So I'm gonna show you with my hands. I'll wash them after. And what I do, I just rub it. Now, if you guys didn't want to go on that route of flavor, you for sure could do harissa and tomato paste. Now, the reason why doing this, I just think that at least the first time I worked with monkfish many years ago. Many, I would say like 16, that was my first job in England. People used to pair monkfish with parm ham. So they would roll it in parm ham, you would have to steam it, then you would have to sear it, and that was it. That was like the dish that people would make with monkfish. Now, there's so many other things. You know, I know Rick Stein, another very well-known chef in UK, does a wonderful vindaloo with monkfish. So they're like steaks, or like also buco, and this absolutely amazing. Okay, so we have this marinated. We're gonna sear that, but this is gonna go with a reduction of 2 things. So I took some white verjus. That's also not very difficult to find. Okay, don't use red. White verjus would be better. It has a more of a grassy tone. I reduce that by 1/3, I would say, and it gets to that kind of consistency. I don't know if you can see that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and apart from that, I did some maple from Vermont that we have right here, okay? And wild apple molasses that maybe someone hasn't really encountered this, but this is really, really interesting. That is also from New York. Is apple cider, wild apple cider. So it has the sweetness of the apple, but it has acidity that is really good, and some soy sauce. So out of that, I made this reduction that is not very, I wish I had a spoon, but I have something sort of similar. So you can see that it's like a very, very, very light caramel. Okay. Now that and the puntarelle, the white verjus, that's gonna be for the sear or like the hot preparation that we have. Okay. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I don't mind answering as I'm cooking.
How long would you typically marinate for? And just so everybody knows, we will send out the recipe, both recipes afterwards.
This monkfish, I would say preferably one night, like overnight, or at least I would say 6 hours, just so it creates a skin. You're gonna see that now this one hasn't been marinated for too long. Problem is it kind of sticks, so you want it to dry out and create a skin. Whenever you guys meat or fish or stuff like that, at least if you're gonna marinate the fish, I would say leave it open, don't cover it with plastic wrap. I don't do that either. I used to also marinate with a similar marinade for a trout, ocean trout, and with the skin on though, so it would have to be uncovered. Now, has anyone worked with puntarelle? I'm not quite sure. We did have it about 2 months ago, I would say until December, by one really good farm called Camparoso, a Union Square Market. This one obviously is not from them. This is Italian. And the way to clean it, I don't know if you guys can see here, you do have to take the outer layers that, by the way, you do use them, not like you're gonna get rid of them, to get into this stocky bits, like this, okay? Once you get into that, if you can see here, you see that? Now you trim the edge because it's too tough. And then there's several ways of doing this. Either you have the patience of using a paring knife and slicing that thinly, or you can use one of these wonderful things that I cannot remember the name. I don't know, Liz, if you know it, but you use it for puntarelle.
I saw that on your table earlier, and I meant to ask you about it. I don't know what that's called. Maybe somebody in here does. They can speak up.
Out and I'll let you know. But what you do is that you literally pass. You sort of trim the bottom that is too tough, and then I'm not an expert again on this. I only learned recently. You go like that, and you see, sort of, it's like get it into like springs. Now, why that is because people usually do puntarelle alla romana, which is the one with garlic, anchovy, and olive oil. You let this in ice water, so you see this has been for like 15 minutes and it's all curly. Once you have that anchovy, garlic, you let it marinate and you eat it as a salad. We're not doing that. So what we're doing is just like, I like to have the puntarelle hot and sear very gently on this induction. And we're gonna do that with this sake soy maple molasses, okay?
All right, somebody spoke up. It's called a taglia puntarelli. So it's specific for cutting puntarelle.
That literally is just for that. But a friend of mine from Natura gave it to me today, and I said, what am I supposed to do with this? And then I said, well, I'll use it today. So there you go, guys. You know, I can do something for the first time. I'm sure you guys can do the same. Yeah, it was funny. You know, we had a funny interaction about this instrument. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question about the puntarelle? Is that typical that you just use the stalks and not the leaves, or are there
Oh no, you
plenty
use
of recipes? Okay.
no,
Oh, so you're gonna incorporate the leaves as well.
I mean, not right now, but I do.
Okay.
For this, I'm just gonna use the stalky bits. The only thing you get rid of is literally on the stalk, right on the bottom, this part that is too hard. I don't know if you can see it.
Mhm.
That's it. The rest, if you don't have this funny instrument that I can't remember the name of this utensil, you just have to do it with a knife. But everything about the puntarelle you want to eat, especially this bowl, is delicious. You know, friend of mine in Paris did it once on, over a binchotan, which is over a grill with charcoal, and they did it with salsa verde. It was incredible. And you know, simple, but again, you know, you don't know until you try. And again, I don't know if you know, puntarelle is a chicory, so this is a whole family of the chicories. You know, radicchio, Castelfranco, Rosa del Veneto, Verona, all of that is it's a chicory, and this is the right season for that right now. I don't know if anyone has a question about monkfish or anything about black garlic or any questions at all. You can just let me know.
Yeah, everybody, don't wait until Q&A because we're going to cook right through Q&A. So if you have a question, now's the time.
I'll try to be quick, but this is actually very simple.
So you called it a monkfish steak. When it's done cooking, what consistency are you working with? Is it that meaty?
Well, you know why? I mean, I think it's just because in general, I think monkfish has that structure. So this dish, when I used to cook it, I used to do it on a plancha. And it will be flip, 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 and let it cook on the plancha. So to me, it had that feeling that it's almost like, obviously not a skirt steak, but like a steak, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the thing with the marinade is that you want this to dry out. You know, like at least for 6 hours or so. Because the black garlic has a lot of sugar, and the miso as well. If we did harissa, you know, same thing. It's obviously not sugar based. Of course, it has peppers and everything else, but you wanna let it dry. And preferably use a non-stick. Also, that would be more useful.
So you shop at the Union Square Market most regularly, right? What are some things you like most about the market?
To be honest with you, the people.
Mm-hmm.
I even go now that I don't have anything to buy. Sometimes I just go and say hi. I go and say hi to Stuart from the wheatgrass, you know, the yellow van.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to a yellow van and I say hi and I chit chat. You know, when Max Krieg also, he goes there, I used to buy his, not always the trout, but I would buy his purple watercress and his beautiful potatoes and sanchoks. I know Zaid and Haifa from Norwich for many years, and I just love that. Obviously, I get excited seeing produce. So summer is just this bountiful, beautiful colors. That does overwhelm me also, because at the same time as a chef, I think that I should be cooking everything available, but it's impossible. But the people, you know, it's a really beautiful community. That's what I think is the most fun to me, you know. And I can see other people that are obviously not they're not chefs, restaurateurs, or anything like that. They do go say hi and stop for a bit and chit chat and blah blah blah. You know, that to me is number one.
Hi, Chef.
Oh, go ahead.
This is Warren Kremen from Blue Ribbon Fish in the Fulton Fish Market. How are you?
Hi, Warren. How are you?
So, being you're kind of touching upon it, I'm just curious, how do you see your culinary life going forward? Obviously, the world has changed so much. You know, we're all kind of struggling to figure out, you know, where our industry is going and what hospitality is going to look like. In fact, my daughter is a graduate student and a chef as a graduate student. She's concerned how, as a accomplished chef, you know, and experienced, how do you feel about approaching what's in front of us?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think with resilience, is one of them. I know that might not be the sexiest word to use right now. I think I went through many waves through the pandemic. You know, I'm not gonna lie. I was at the beginning sort of, you know, relaxed because I don't usually rest. You know, so it was a wave of like, I'm resting. This is great, and then it's like panicking of what's gonna happen with this industry, and restaurants are shuttering and da da da. But also, you know, I had the reassurance in my heart that I do love what I do. You know, I'm sure you also do love what you do. And it's so intersect to, you know, what I do to what you do. I sometimes feel like, obviously, and I feel usually about this before pandemic, that the restaurant business needed more help regardless, you know. I don't think it was just due pandemic that this is happening. I think New York has been suffering for a very, very long time of the way we do business, and surviving has been really difficult.
Why? Can you elaborate on that? Because we're probably on the same page here. But
like, you know, rent and wages and salary and all those conversations that people sort of like, you know, everyone at one point was saying, oh, all I want is just the industry to be turned upside down and we can finally make a change. I mean, I hope so. You know, I hope that we're going to do that. I'm not sure. You know, this is a real estate business. It's not even a restaurant business anymore.
You know, it's interesting because we've actually got the attention of Sea Grant. We had the right people from the state on the phone. So maybe the question turns into another summit or another question, where if we could make some sort of effort to support locally harvested product. I mean, you're working with Monkfish. I'm sure you work with local calamar and maybe some of the other local fish like either tile or even porgies for that matter. If there was some way to create a program, I mean, farmers and produce, they're subsidized, you know, in certain ways, and so is the poultry industry. I wonder if.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'm going with this. I think sometimes, you know, you know, capitalism hasn't really helped us necessarily that much, you know, and for sure we need help from the government. You know, this is unsustainable the way it works, you know. That's how I see it. It might be a very naive interpretation of view of how I see things, but I do see it that way, you know. I don't think this is necessarily a problem that just happened now. It just exposed many problems, you know. It didn't just create one. It exposed the fact that no restaurant right now can survive working with 35% indoors. Everyone knows that's just unattainable and it's just a lie. We do it because what else are you gonna do? If you can survive and you can open, sure. But you know that if you don't have 100%, even with 100%, it's still difficult to make a business, you know?
It's definitely going to be very, very interesting going forward to see how we reach out to rebuild the business and regain the consumer confidence that we need to drive that business and go forward. I definitely agree with you.
Also, I think you're right. You know, consumers sometimes they forget that they are the main tool that we need. It's not necessarily just a critic from the New York Times, even though of course I love what they do for their job, but I think is a neighborhood mentality of people need to support a business, you know, and sometimes it can get quite difficult, even for the same sense that people don't like eating porgy. Once I put porgy on the menu, and then people were, you know, appalled. It's mind blowing to me, you know.
It's really not much different than than the Greek orata or the Greek dorade in a sense. And if we could get the marketing behind it, right?
Yeah, but you know what's funny? Once I actually had this really interesting doctor. I was working with Dr. Dish, and they sent me also this porgy, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna call it silver dorade. And someone is like, does that exist? I said, I don't care. I said, I'm sure it's gonna sell, and it did sell. You know, so I mean that tells you how people work. You know, that mentality has to change. And it's a work in progress, you know.
On another note, I have one more question if I can. Can you speak towards, because I have a theory that fish is a protein, much more emotional protein and connection with that protein than necessarily some of the other proteins and maybe even the garnishes. For example, when you receive your deliveries as a chef, you know, if the produce comes or the meat comes, do you actually stop what you're doing to go and inspect every piece of meat and look in the eyes and look at the gills? And would you agree that your fish delivery is a little bit more of an emotional experience than some of your other proteins?
Yeah, I agree with you, because you know the problem is that it's also another problem that we have. Sorry, right now, just so you guys know, I'm using some of the white verjus on the puntarelle. Yeah, because you know the problem too that we have with meat is that everything is packaged, so it also creates this disconnection with chefs that we don't really know where the cow comes from and how a slaughterhouse works. It's the same with fish. It's like I have the whole delivery. I obviously go and see, and also I love saying hi if it's the main guy, my purveyor or my supplier that I work with, that usually they go and say hi. It's, to me, that's an interaction that's necessary, as also the first sort of friendship that you form, you know, that it's you know, I know them by name, they know me, you know, it's just family in a sense, you know. But you're right, it is very different, you know. I don't get packaged seafood, you know, that I don't really inspect, or usually I get whole fish. Now, talking about that, in general, people don't really have the time to fillet their own fish, and they have a butcher. So you see the industry has changed in so many ways that it moves you from the source of origin, if it makes sense what I'm saying. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Very well. Thank you, Chef.
So the Monkfish needs one more minute. Just to go back to what we did. Is this camera the best? We sauteed the puntarella stalks very lightly with some olive oil. I deglaze with some of the white verjus. We will use some of this reduction just to like warm it up and go over the fish, and some chives, and that will be it. I think the verjus has an interesting characteristic. I've used it on tomatoes because it brings out the grassy flavor of tomato. I think with the puntarelle and some of the bitterness that it has, it goes very well. The marinade of the monkfish also being black garlic and miso and having that sweet tone. I just think that sometimes we just have to understand either sweet, sour, salty, umami. If you know that monkfish can be paired with a vindaloo, which is spicy tomato, you know, monkfish has many ways of being showcased at your table. And it's not necessarily just with the farm ham, which there's nothing wrong with that. But also it sustains at a crazy amount of heat. It's very forgiving, you know, and just incredibly delicious. So yeah.
Great. Well, we're just approaching 4 o'clock. Did you say you just needed 1 or 2 more minutes?
This is it.
Oh, yum. Wow, look at that. And if anybody has any last minute questions, now is the time.
Hi, I actually have a quick question. My name is Josh. I'm with Homakase doing some sustainable in-home, seafood experiences. I get a lot of liver, with all my fish, and I feel bad making, a very limited number of things, of course, pate, etc. with it. Do you have any other recommendations for what you can do with all the leftover liver?
Well, to be honest with you, I would just sear it. Sear, and do even something so classic like capers and lemon. I think people need to understand how to also eat fish liver. Sear on the plancha is absolutely delicious. People tend to do pate because there are things that they know that people can recognize. Like monkfish, or everyone is like, oh, monkfish liver, but what about fluke? What about I don't know right now, I'm blanking, but the same thing like when I get the eggs of the striped bass, sometimes it's all of that. So my recommendation, which it might not gain too many supporters at the same time straight away, it would be to sear it. That's what I would do. Sorry, I do not have a spoon, but I'm gonna just pour a little bit of this white verjus on top.
So as we finish up, just want to point out to everybody that in the chat is the event evaluation. If you could click on that before you head out today and fill out the quick survey, we would be very appreciative. We hold this event every year, and we're always looking to improve the Seafood Summit and provide the programming that everybody is looking for. Wow, that looks incredible.
So literally that glaze I just poured over the fish whilst it's hot. It's actually something you can keep for a long time in the fridge. I think it's also fun to do. Again, and the verjus, I just pour more, so it has like a little bit of broth, and then you can share with the puntarelle, and it's just very simple. In general, I'm not always working with a carbohydrate, and I love simple things like that. So I hope this was useful. I hope you guys liked it. And then I'll send the recipes or whatever, any questions you have about other sort of marinades for monkfish or ways to prepare. I am all ears, and I can send info away. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chef.
Of course, thanks.
All right, thank you, Chef Blamey, and thank you, Liz. I want to also thank everybody who participated today. Again, before we end, please do take a moment to fill out that event evaluation, and remember that this is the first in a series of events taking place this week. We've got them listed here on the slide, and we also have them linked on the Seafood Summit website. You can go there to find out more information and to register. We hope to see you guys again later this week. Have a great week. Thank you.